Hello everyone! In this week's video, I'm going to be coloring your line art. It's been a really long time since I last did this, and many of you enjoy submitting your pictures and seeing me color line art that is not my own, and I also find it really fun. Plus, I have this massive set of 320 Ohuhu markers to test out. These were sent to me by Ohuhu, and I was super excited because I've always wanted to work with them, and this is their largest set of markers. Like I said, there are 320 of them. These markers have two different nibs, a chisel nib and the very beloved brush nib. I like how it's easy to tell which side is which with the help of this gray ring. The side of the gray ring is the brush nib. Plus the caps have a number and name printed on them, so it's easy to identify the different colors. With this many markers, you definitely want to be able to easily tell which color is which. And to help with this, they provide swatch charts. I do like how they are broken up into 4 smaller pieces. They are organized into different color groups, and the names and marker numbers are printed next to each box. Obviously, I'm not going to make you watch me swatch all 320 markers. That would be enough footage for a video on its own. But here is footage of me swatching the Y category of colors. Also, you may notice this clear sheet behind my paper. This is a nifty thing Ohuhu gives you. You can put it behind your paper to protect other paper or surfaces from the marker bleed through. My process for swatching the markers is I would scan the marker case for markers that had the letter I was looking for. Then I would place all the markers to one side of me. Grab a marker, find the correct box, and then swatch the marker and move it to the other side. At first I was going to swatch the boxes in order, but I found it easier to pick a random marker from my pile and then find the right box on the swatch chart because the numbers on the chart are organized, so it's easier to find the right swatch box instead of trying to find the right marker for the box. I hope that makes sense. Also, the carrying case is very snazzy. I like how it comes with a long strap that you can clip on and off. And you can break the markers up into different groups. Also, you may have noticed that the markers are not organized by color when you get them, but I will be trying my best to organize them by color after I swatch them, because seeing all the colors organized makes me happy and it's easier to find colors. If you do get this set, I highly recommend swatching the colors even if it does take a decent amount of time, because the caps don't match the color of the markers very well. A lot of times the color on the cap is much lighter than the actual color. It was actually a bit tricky for me to find colors if I was looking at the swatch chart and trying to scan for the color based on the cap. But I quickly learned you need to scan for the number and name because the caps don't always match the greatest for their color. So here are all the yellows, and a while later I had swatched all the colors. There is a very good variety of colors. I like how each color has a good amount of hues and values. Sometimes with marker sets it can feel like some colors don't get much variety, but you get a very nice selection with this. Also, here's what the colors look like when they're all organized. I kind of went from the grays to the earth tones to yellows to greens to blues to purple, violets, and then the reds and pinks. I felt like that made the most sense to do. Now that I know what colors I am working with, we can start coloring some line art. There were so many great options that I couldn't make up my mind, so I decided to randomly pick from the submissions. This first one was submitted by Layla. I really like the sketchy feel of their line work, so I printed out the line art onto my cardstock paper. This is the brand I use. It's not special marker paper or anything, but it's super smooth and on the thicker side, so it works great for markers, plus it's pretty inexpensive compared to most marker papers. For this picture, I wanted to keep things pretty simple for the coloring to help me get used to the markers and how they work. It's been a super long time since I last worked with alcohol-based markers. My sketchbook I am currently drawing in is a watercolor sketchbook, so for traditional mediums I've been mostly using watercolor paints and markers. Also, if you don't know, alcohol-based markers are different from water-based markers. The alcohol base allows the ink from different markers to blend into each other. It's also easier to get a smooth flat layer of color, and it doesn't eat up the paper like water-based markers do. This ability to put down smooth layers and blend colors is what makes alcohol-based markers a popular choice for many artists. Also, these markers having a brush nib makes it easier to blend colors. With the brush nib, you're able to get variety in how much ink goes onto the paper, and you can do a flicking motion to get a nice feathering effect at the end of your strokes. So it's often preferred over a chisel nib. For the hair, I decided to go with an orangey red color. As you saw, I started by laying down the base color and then went on top with these other markers of varying values to add shading. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of how I shaded the hair in this picture. I feel like it's okay, but I also feel like I could have done better. But like I said, this picture is kind of my warm-up to help me get used to working with markers again. That being said, I did want to experiment and try new things. Before coloring the skin, I decided to put some colors down first that will shine through the base layer. The first being that I wanted to add a light purple marker for where I want the shadows to be. The markers are kind of translucent, so in theory we will still see this purple, but it'll mix with the skin tone that I put on top. At least I hope it will. Next, I'm adding the blush first. I actually see the artist Chihiro Howe do this. She does amazing marker work. I highly recommend looking at her stuff. It's so good. By putting down the blush first, we can more easily get a nice gradient and apply the skin color on top second. I do want to mention that I should have let the blush dry a bit longer because I used the colorless blender to blend out the edges, and I didn't let this fully dry. When I go on top of this area by the cheek, my skin tone lightened in that area a bit and it made an area with a slightly different color. And I didn't notice this until I finished the picture because it is very subtle. But yeah, if you do apply the blush like this, make sure that the ink dries before going on top with your other colors. It probably would have been okay if I hadn't used the colorless blender, but the blender is basically only the alcohol base with no color in it, so it lightens areas where you apply it, and because it was still wet, it lightened my base tone and around the cheek a bit. Also, because I decided to go with a tan skin tone, the purple does show through, but I probably could have picked a slightly darker purple and maybe one that's a little more pink. But like I said, I am experimenting and trying to learn, so it's okay that's not exactly what I wanted. But now I know how to get closer to what I want, so that's good. Because I went with an orangey red for the hair, I decided to make his eyes and shirt a teal blue. This is complementary to orangey red, plus I really like teal. We're going to speed through the rest of the coloring a bit. I feel like I could talk on and on for each picture, but we do have to keep moving. Overall, I feel like this was a good starter picture for me to do, and it helped me get into the flow of using markers again, and helped me experiment with shadows and layering markers. Oh, also, to add some highlights, I used a white gel pen. These are super nice for adding highlights after you color. So here is the finished coloring. Thank you so much, Ina, for letting me color your line art. I had a lot of fun. This next picture was submitted by Amana Artica, and the character you drew is so cute. This time I'm starting with the skin because I wanted to blend some of the skin tone into the bangs to make them feel a bit softer. But first I'm putting down my blush and shadow colors. This time for my shadow colors to make them a bit warmer, I'm using a mixture of purple and pink. I was trying to be a little more bold with my color selections and trying not to fear the colors. For traditional art, I tend to chicken out and use a lot of light colors or not very bold choices, but I was trying to be more confident with my color choices. When putting down base colors and I want them to be smooth, I move in small circular motions and I try my best to keep the edges of the coloring areas really wet so they will keep blending into each other and we don't end up with an edge or seam. I also make sure to really soak the paper with the ink so it's evenly dispersed throughout the area. That being said, I did end up with a small slight seam at the bridge of the nose, but it's not too noticeable. I actually colored in a way so that the seam would be in that area because I often find it's a spot you can kind of get away with it. This is the one thing about markers is that you need to work fast. If you want colors to blend smoothly, you need to work while the ink is wet, and it dries pretty fast. But of course, if you want hard edges, you wait until the ink dries. There's also a lot of switching back and forth between markers. Like I'll apply the base color, then apply the shadow, but then go back to the base color to blend it out. And then if I'm making the color even deeper, I add in a third marker. And then I switch to my second marker, and then my first marker, and then my second marker, and my third marker. And things can feel chaotic. But thankfully this picture was very manageable for blending. The hair is an area where I did a lot of blending. Like I said, I wasn't a huge fan of how I colored the hair in the last picture. And I think that's because I kind of colored all the hair at once. This time I'm coloring each section to allow for the blending to be super smooth. So instead of coloring all the hair with my base color, all of the hair with my first shadow color, and so on, I'm coloring each section with all of the shading one at a time. And I do have to say, I am much more happy with the hair this time around. I used a lot of flicking motions, and since the hair is a light blonde, I let the white of the paper shine through in some areas where I wanted the highlights to be really bright. Also, I did put down a base color of pink to the underside of the hair. I was hoping it would help warm up the shadow colors, and I think it did its job. It's kind of hard to say. Oh, also, the brush nib is especially nice when coloring hair because you can easily get lines that taper and get lighter. There is a lot of hair in this picture, so it did take me a while to color it all. It's pretty repetitive, so let's switch to the clothes. I decided to make the shirt white, and to shade the white, I'm using the lightest pale blue I could find. Like I said, you do get a very nice variety of colors, but I do wish there were some more pastel colors. The lightest colors you get are pretty light, but I feel like it would be nice to have some even lighter colors. But that may just be me since I love pastel colors. I love the most pastel of pastels. But having really pastel colors can also be really nice for blending things out. So I do wish there were some more of them. For this, I actually ended up using the colorless blender to help blend the blue into the white of the paper. Because I do have so many colors to work with for this set, I try to make sure to pick multiple shading colors for each element. In the past, I feel like sometimes my marker work feels a bit flat because I would get timid when it comes to blending and using a lot of colors. So for this, I wanted to try my best to use more colors and apply lots of blending, especially since I have so many colors. Speaking of blending, when it comes to markers, what paper you use matters a ton. The paper can completely change how the markers behave. A lot of times it's recommended to use smooth paper that the ink can freely move around on. If you are using something like watercolor paper, because of how it's made, it will soak up the ink and use a ton of the ink from your marker, and it can be harder to move the ink around and blend because the paper is more absorbent. This is why I use smooth cardstock. It doesn't have much texture and allows for the ink to move around, so it's easier to blend. But it's also thick enough that I can handle a decent amount of ink. Sometimes if you overload the paper with ink, the colors start to feather out and you need to be careful of this. It actually kind of happened to me around the girl's chin with her shadow colors, and I am a bit sad about that. So yeah, something like printer paper is smooth, but since it's thin, it can't hold much ink. So that's why I choose the cardstock. That being said, if I plan to do mixed media like markers with color pencils, I will sometimes use mixed media paper that has a little bit more tooth to it, so that way it works better alongside color pencils. It can be hard to layer pencils on super smooth paper because there's no tooth for the pencil to go into. So yeah, make sure to consider your paper for your project, especially when using markers because it can play a lot into how they work. Anyways, here's the finished picture. Thank you so much, Amana Artica, for letting me color your picture. I had a ton of fun coloring the eyes with the way you drew them. This last picture was drawn by Liv Scribbles, and it seems to be fan art of Layla from Genshin Impact. I've actually wanted to draw Layla because her design is super cute, so I'm happy I get to color a picture of her at least. Layla's skin is a really light color, and like I said, some of the colors in this set don't get super light. I was actually using the lightest skin tone I had on the last picture, but this wasn't light enough for Layla. However, to help the color stay lighter, I tried to apply the color very lightly. I barely let the marker touch the paper and try to keep my movements very light and not go over areas more than needed. I was nervous about this because this can result in streaky coloring, but since the color is so light, it doesn't matter too much and I was able to get a color I was happy with. I was a bit nervous about coloring this picture, mostly because I knew it would take a decent amount of time because Genshin characters have so many details and colors in their designs. So I did feel like this picture would be a good challenge for my coloring. Plus, with this picture being a fan art, it allowed me to see if this set has a good enough variety to try to match specific colors. And I do have to say, I was able to get pretty close to Layla's colors with the colors in the set, so that's really good. Like I said, with there being 320 markers, there's a very nice variety to choose from. And many of you are probably asking how much is this set of markers, and the answer to that is that they are $244.99. And you might be thinking, wow, that's a lot of money. And it is, but when you look at the price per marker, it breaks down to about 77 cents per marker, and this is way more affordable than other brands that offer brush nib markers. A lot of times you have to pay more if you want brush nibs. And considering these do have a brush nib and they are still under $1 each, this is a very nice deal. Also, Ohuhu does sell replacement nibs, so you can replace the nibs on your markers if for some reason they go bad. I do often wish Ohuhu offered refills. This is one downside to them. Once a marker runs out of ink, you can't refill it like you can with some other brands. But these markers are also much more affordable than most, so that's nice. I think Ohuhu is a great introductory brand or a great wallet-friendly brand to go with. And this 320 set is super nice and has a ton of wonderful colors. But you could totally go for some of the smaller sets if they are more in your budget or you kind of just want to try markers out. However, if you have tried out markers and you're looking to upgrade to a set with tons of colors, this is a great one to go with in my opinion. The markers work really well and you get a lot of color variety. Anyways, back to Layla. One part I was super nervous for was her hair. It has a really pretty gradient from a dark muted blue to a light teal and I absolutely love it. However, I was a bit scared to color it. It wasn't too bad actually, but I was switching between like 6 different markers and it felt so chaotic. I was trying my best to keep track of my markers and which ones I had. To help me keep track, I kept my 2 darker shadow colors on the right, my 2 lighter shadow colors on the left, my darkest color in my mouth, and then my lightest color in my left hand. It required a lot of markers and blending, but I am happy with the result, I think. I feel like I got a fairly good smooth gradient color. Another part I was excited for, but also slightly dreading, was the gold elements. Gold is very shiny, and to make things look shiny, you need a lot of contrast in colors. So for each little section, I am doing a lot of switching between darker and lighter yellows. This part was tedious, but also fun because I love shiny things and rendering shiny things. So I did enjoy this part. If you often watch my videos, you have heard me mention that I don't play Genshin very much now, but I do still really love the character designs for a lot of the characters and often feel the urge to draw them even though I don't know much about the characters because I haven't been playing. Like I said, Layla is one of the ones I've wanted to draw. I just really love her colors and her design is so pretty and cute. I've also wanted to draw Nahida. She's so cute, and Alhaitham, he looks so cool. I did meet Tainari in the game because I did update my game and play the Sumeru content for a little bit. And he was different from what I was expecting. He's kind of sassy. I don't know, he's kind of got some attitude, I feel like. But I didn't see a ton of his content. But yeah, even though I don't really play Genshin, I still want to draw a lot of the characters. Working with traditional mediums again was super fun. I don't get to do it super often, so I really enjoyed getting to color these illustrations with markers. I do really like working digitally, and it is my preferred medium, but there's something about making art with actual art supplies and being able to hold it and see the art in real life that's really satisfying. That being said, it is also a bit more stressful. I don't have the undo button. But overall, I had a ton of fun using these markers, and thank you so much to Ohuhu for sending them to me. I really enjoyed using them and experimenting with them, and overall, I'm pretty pleased with how all of these pictures turned out. I feel like I learned a lot from coloring them. I want to thank everyone who submitted your lovely line art. I had so much fun looking through all of the submissions. There were so many amazing pictures I would love to color if I had the time. And thank you again to Liv Scribbles, Amana Artica, and Nina for letting me color your pictures. I hope you like how I colored them. Oh, also, Liv Scribbles has an online shop and her stuff is super cute, so I'll leave a link to it in the description. There are also links to the Ohuhu markers I used, so if you want to check them out for yourself, there are links in the description and pinned comment. Before we end, I want to say a big thank you to my super amazing YouTube members and Patreon patrons. Your support means a ton to me. And thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next week in my next video. Bye!